People admire discipline, yet quietly mock relentless strivers. They call them obsessed, rigid, unable to relax. But the same pattern appears closer to home. Deadlines approach, and energy suddenly dissolves. Ambitions fade precisely when effort becomes uncomfortable. Something ancient tightens beneath the surface. The deeper pattern hides beneath that tightening. Failure at difficult tasks is often described as laziness or weakness, yet such labels describe observable behaviors rather than fixed identities. The language sounds personal, but what we witness is a patterned response emerging from protective neural circuitry. When effort intensifies and uncertainty expands, the brain does not interpret ambition as noble. It often interprets it as threat. Hard things stretch predictability, and unpredictability has always carried potential danger for a survival-driven organism. Psychologist Carl Jung observed that the psyche resists expansion when expansion threatens stability, even when stability limits growth. A person begins learning a demanding skill. Enthusiasm carries them through early progress. Then complexity rises and motivation thins almost overnight. They tell others they simply lost interest, yet their body feels subtly relieved after stepping away. Relief is rarely examined, yet it reveals the nervous system choosing safety over exposure. At work, someone volunteers for a challenging assignment. Confidence appears steady during planning, but as execution nears, their schedule fills with trivial distractions. Emails multiply, minor tasks become urgent, and the meaningful work waits untouched. From the outside, this appears irresponsible. Internally, it feels like avoiding invisible danger. The brain prefers manageable discomfort over uncertain evaluation, because evaluation historically determined belonging. Evolutionary psychologists suggest that exclusion from the group once threatened survival more directly than physical hardship. Attempting something difficult risks visible failure, and visible failure risks subtle social rejection. Even when modern consequences are mild, the nervous system reacts with ancient intensity. A student studies diligently for weeks, practice tests go well, then the night before the exam, exhaustion suddenly overwhelms them. They scroll through their phone promising to resume shortly, but hours dissolve into passive distraction. The next day, performance drops just enough to confirm private doubt. The mind then protects itself with a convenient narrative about unfair questions or poor sleep. This is not stupidity. It is a strategic retreat from potential identity collapse. Hard pursuits threaten the story a person holds about who they are. If effort is maximal and outcomes still fall short, the self-concept absorbs the impact. If effort is incomplete, the ego preserves an illusion of unrealized potential. Behavioral scientist B.F. Skinner noted that organisms repeat behaviors that reduce discomfort, even when those behaviors limit long-term reward. Avoiding full exertion reduces the immediate pain of possible inadequacy. The brain registers that reduction as success. Consider someone training for a marathon. Early runs feel empowering. Progress is measurable, and praise arrives easily. Later distances demand solitude and strain. Improvement slows, and applause fades into silence. One rainy morning, the alarm rings and remains unanswered. The body feels heavy, yet beneath the heaviness rests a quiet permission to stop stretching beyond comfort. This permission feels soothing, not shameful in the moment. What appears as quitting is often the nervous system conserving energy against uncertain payoff. Throughout history, wasted energy could mean starvation or vulnerability. The brain still calculates cost versus return with primitive caution. Hard goals promise delayed reward, while the present moment offers immediate conservation. Most people believe they lack discipline, yet discipline conflicts with deep biological thrift. The resistance pattern is not random. It activates precisely when stakes feel personally revealing. Small tasks rarely trigger it because identity is not attached. Large ambitions expose competence, status, intelligence, and worth to observation. Exposure activates defensive withdrawal long before conscious reasoning intervenes. This is why people first notice the pattern in others, labeling them inconsistent or unserious. Observation from a distance disguises the protective logic operating beneath the surface. Seen closely, the pattern resembles a reflex rather than a choice. The deeper origin of this reflex traces back further than modern ambition, and it does not begin in adulthood. If you're still watching, you probably notice things most people miss. You question behavior. You look beneath the surface. If that sounds like you, subscribe. This channel was made for minds like yours. The resistance pattern does not emerge from adult laziness. It is assembled quietly during early learning about safety, approval, and consequence. Long before goals become conscious, the brain maps which efforts lead to acceptance and which invite discomfort or withdrawal. Children quickly sense when success brings conditional warmth and failure brings silence, tension, or subtle disappointment. The nervous system records these emotional shifts without language, encoding them as somatic memory. A child shows a drawing. Praise arrives briefly, then attention moves elsewhere. Effort feels costly and reward feels unstable. Another child answers incorrectly in class. Laughter ripples, the body tightens, heat rises, memory imprints instantly. The lesson is not intellectual, it is visceral. Visibility carries risk. Psychiatrist Viktor Frankl described how meaning collapses when pain feels pointless, and the brain learns to avoid pointless exposure early. When effort does not reliably produce safety, effort itself becomes suspect. Evolution layered onto this learning an older calculus rooted in energy preservation. For most of human history, wasted exertion reduced survival odds. Every calorie mattered. The brain evolved to hesitate before investing energy into uncertain outcomes. Modern ambition confuses this system, demanding prolonged effort without immediate feedback. The nervous system still asks an ancient question: is this worth the cost right now? A child practices an instrument, fingers ache, progress feels slow, parental attention fluctuates with performance. Eventually, practice sessions shorten, excuses lengthen, relief follows withdrawal. The body learns that stopping restores equilibrium faster than pushing through ambiguity. Fear also plays a shaping role, but not fear of pain, fear of meaning attached to failure. When failure threatens identity rather than outcome, avoidance becomes protection. Social learning reinforces this pattern as children watch others receive praise for effortless talent. Effort without visible success becomes quietly associated with humiliation. Evolutionary psychologists suggest that appearing incompetent once reduced mating prospects and alliance strength. The brain tracks not just outcomes, but how outcomes alter social standing. A teenager studies intensely, expectations rise around them, pressure thickens the air. On exam day, anxiety disrupts recall, results disappoint, whispers circulate. The brain links full effort with amplified shame. Next time, effort decreases preemptively, expectations soften, emotional exposure narrows. This is not sabotage, it is calibration. The nervous system adjusts investment to limit potential damage. Cultural messaging deepens this adjustment by glorifying natural brilliance over gradual mastery. Those who struggle publicly are framed as lacking ability rather than building skill. Children internalize that trying hard is evidence of deficiency. The brain prefers to appear casually disengaged rather than visibly inadequate. This preference hardens into habit through repetition. Behavioral conditioning reinforces it as avoidance consistently reduces anxiety. Each retreat teaches the brain that withdrawal works. Neural pathways strengthen around disengagement, not because it is optimal, but because it is reliable. Stress hormones drop when effort ceases. Relief confirms the behavior. Over time, the pattern activates faster, sometimes before conscious awareness. A young adult enrolls in a demanding program. Enthusiasm masks fear initially. As difficulty escalates, sleep fragments, procrastination increases, commitment quietly erodes. They tell themselves circumstances changed, yet the body already decided. The origin is not lack of desire. It is learned risk assessment shaped by early experience. The brain learned that pushing fully carries unpredictable emotional cost. Avoidance became an elegant compromise between ambition and safety. This compromise remains invisible because it feels like choice rather than reflex. What began as childhood adaptation now surfaces as adult inconsistency. The pattern did not form to limit potential, it formed to prevent psychological injury. Yet its most visible expression appears not internally, but across social landscapes where others misinterpret its function. Once internalized, The resistance pattern becomes legible not as feeling, but as behavior unfolding across social environments. It appears first where performance intersects with visibility, because visibility awakens old calculations about safety and status. In friendships, someone speaks confidently about plans, creative projects, fitness goals, learning languages. Momentum feels convincing at first. Weeks later, the subject quietly disappears from conversation, replaced by humor, irony, or self-deprecation. Friends notice inconsistency, yet rarely notice the precise moment enthusiasm turned into silence. That moment usually coincided with rising difficulty or implied evaluation. At a dinner table, a person shares an idea, others respond with polite curiosity rather than admiration. The room does not reject them, but something inside contracts. Later that night, motivation fades without conscious explanation. The social brain interpreted neutrality as warning. In romantic relationships, the pattern often masquerades as emotional distance or sudden loss of effort. Early pursuit feels effortless because reward is immediate and affirmation flows easily. As intimacy deepens, vulnerability replaces novelty. Effort becomes less performative and more revealing. One partner begins postponing conversations, delaying commitments, working longer hours. They describe feeling tired, yet energy returns when demands recede. This is not indifference, it is exposure fatigue. The brain senses that deeper engagement risks evaluation of inadequacy rather than admiration. Psychologist John Bowlby suggested that attachment behaviors emerge when security feels uncertain. Withdrawal can be an attachment signal, not a lack of care. In families, the pattern surfaces through chronic postponement of responsibility. An adult child talks about career advancement, education, relocation, yet actions stall at critical thresholds. Family members interpret this as immaturity or fear of adulthood. Internally, the nervous system associates family scrutiny with conditional acceptance learned long ago. At work, the pattern becomes especially visible because performance hierarchies echo early social ranking. An employee excels during low-pressure phases. Creativity flows when outcomes feel distant. As deadlines approach and evaluation sharpens, productivity fragments. Meetings are attended, ideas discussed, yet execution drags behind intention. Colleagues label this inconsistency as lack of discipline. What they do not see is the internal spike of threat triggered by imminent judgment. A presentation looms, preparation begins strong, then perfectionism paralyzes progress. Slides are endlessly revised, yet core structure remains unfinished. Avoidance disguises itself as refinement. In group dynamics, people often spot the pattern most clearly in those competing for status. Someone speaks boldly about ambition, yet avoids arenas where comparison is unavoidable. They critique systems, question fairness, downplay the importance of winning. These narratives reduce the emotional cost of not fully entering the arena. Sociologist Irving Goffman wrote about performance as social survival, where roles protect the self from exposure. The resistance pattern selects safer roles when stakes rise. In leadership contexts, it can look like indecision or delegation avoidance. A manager delays difficult calls, defers accountability, hides behind process. Risking visible failure feels heavier than absorbing quiet inefficiency. Public settings reveal subtler versions of the same mechanism. A person begins a fitness routine, shares progress online, encouragement flows early. As results plateau, posting stops, workouts shorten, explanation shifts toward busyness. The audience fades, relief arrives. The brain interprets reduced observation as restored safety. People often notice this in others first because distance removes empathy. From the outside, the behavior reads as self-sabotage. From the inside, it feels like pressure dissipating. In creative fields, the pattern often delays completion rather than initiation. Beginnings feel safe because judgment is deferred. Finishing invites comparison, critique, permanence. A writer drafts endlessly but avoids publishing. An artist experiments constantly but rarely exhibits. The work remains potential rather than verdict. Power dynamics intensify the pattern when authority figures are involved. Feedback from superiors triggers disproportionate stress compared to peer input. The nervous system remembers early hierarchies where approval meant security. Even neutral critique activates defensive retreat. A brief pause becomes a prolonged disengagement. Silence replaces initiative. Social systems often misinterpret this silence as lack of motivation. In reality, motivation is present but constrained by threat detection. Modern social life multiplies these triggers by making comparison constant. Metrics, rankings, visibility, and performance indicators surround daily behavior. The brain remains alert, scanning for cues of inadequacy. Each cue tightens the same ancient loop. Midway through life, many people notice a narrowing of ambition rather than its fulfillment. They call it realism or maturity. Often it is accumulated avoidance masquerading as wisdom. The resistance pattern adapts socially, learning where withdrawal preserves dignity. Yet this adaptation extracts quiet costs that grow harder to ignore. Modern environments amplify the pattern so efficiently that it begins to feel like personality rather than conditioning. What intensifies it further is not just social exposure, but the structure of contemporary life itself. Modern systems quietly reward behaviors that align with immediate comfort rather than sustained discomfort, reinforcing ancient neural preferences. Technology delivers stimulation without prolonged effort, training attention to expect rapid reward cycles. When difficulty demands patience, the nervous system compares it to easier alternatives available instantly. The comparison is rarely conscious, yet it alters motivation subtly. A person opens a laptop to work on a demanding proposal. Notifications glow softly at the screen's edge. One click offers novelty, affirmation, distraction, none requiring vulnerability. Minutes turn into an hour. Tension decreases. Task remains untouched. The brain registers reduced anxiety as a successful outcome. Platforms quantify approval through likes, views, and comments, transforming visibility into measurable currency. Effort that risks low engagement feels socially dangerous. Creative risks decline as algorithms reward familiarity and predictability. Ambition narrows toward what guarantees response rather than what demands growth. Behavioral economist Daniel Kahneman described how the mind prefers cognitive ease over strain. Digital environments are engineered around ease. Hard pursuits feel heavier by contrast. In workplace culture, constant productivity metrics create continuous low-grade evaluation. Performance dashboards update in real time. Comparisons become unavoidable. The nervous system rarely experiences psychological privacy. A professional begins a challenging innovation project. Initial excitement competes with visible performance targets. If early results lag, anxiety spikes before learning stabilizes. Abandoning the project preserves short-term metrics. The organization rewards visible efficiency more than invisible experimentation. Educational systems mirror this structure by emphasizing grades over process. Students learn to optimize for evaluation rather than exploration. When exploration feels unsafe, intellectual risk declines. The brain adapts by choosing tasks with predictable scoring. Economic pressures intensify this adaptation. Rising costs of living and unstable job markets make failure feel catastrophic rather than instructive. The survival brain interprets career risks as existential threats. Even modest setbacks trigger disproportionate stress responses. A young professional considers switching industries to pursue meaningful work. Spreadsheets outline financial uncertainty. Sleep becomes fragmented as the body simulates worst-case outcomes. Staying in the familiar role restores calm, even if dissatisfaction persists. The pattern appears pragmatic, yet it is primarily protective. Cultural narratives further complicate perception by celebrating relentless hustle while stigmatizing visible struggle. Success stories compress years of effort into simplified arcs. The messy middle remains hidden. When personal progress feels slower than curated examples, discouragement accelerates. Comparison erodes resilience silently. Neuroscience suggests that chronic stress narrows cognitive flexibility. Under stress, creativity declines and avoidance increases. Modern life maintains background stress almost continuously. Sleep deprivation, information overload, and social comparison create sustained arousal. In this state, the brain defaults to familiar coping patterns. Resistance to hard things strengthens because hard things require calm bandwidth. Even leisure activities reflect this amplification. Streaming platforms auto-play the next episode without requiring decision. Passive consumption becomes easier than active creation. The nervous system gravitates toward predictable pleasure loops. Micro-rewards replace long-horizon fulfillment. A person plans to write each evening after work. Exhaustion meets glowing screens, offering effortless immersion. Choosing writing requires tolerating uncertainty and delayed reward. Choosing streaming requires nothing. Over time, repetition wires preference. The brain does not evaluate morality. It evaluates energy expenditure and emotional risk. Modern culture aligns incentives with minimal exposure. Self-branding encourages curated identities rather than authentic experimentation. Mistakes are archived permanently online, amplifying fear of public imperfection. The cost of visible failure feels amplified compared to previous generations. Therefore, the resistance pattern activates sooner and more intensely. It becomes woven into daily habits so seamlessly that it resembles temperament. People describe themselves as easily distracted or inconsistent, unaware of structural reinforcement. What appears as personal weakness often reflects environmental design interacting with ancient circuitry. Yet despite this amplification, awareness of the pattern does not automatically dissolve it. Recognition introduces discomfort of a different kind. Seeing the mechanism removes the comfort of ignorance. And that awareness begins to expose a quieter, more unsettling truth about the self. Layer 5. Awareness without resolution. The voice remains calm and clinical as recognition deepens while offering no tidy ending. Awareness arrives like an uninvited witness. Clarity unfolds and brings a new, uncomfortable currency to measure private limits and loss. The mind catalogs each retreat as evidence. Memory does not forgive or forget. It reorganizes identity around safer margins. Suddenly, ordinary choices contain weight. Choosing comfort becomes moralized internally. Quiet shame sharpens beneath moments of ease and relief. Microstory. A colleague rehearses a pitch for weeks. Their hands tremble before presentation. Afterwards, laughter covers a relief that feels permanent. The relief that follows withdrawal often resembles triumph in small ways. It is soothing and repeats like a learned ritual. Microstory. A partner promises to talk later. Evenings pass with soft avoidance. Closeness retreats just enough to preserve image of competence. Each avoided encounter rewrites intimacy. Distance accumulates in increments. Affection adapts to safety, not authenticity. Microstory. A student abandons the thesis 2 chapters shy of completion. The desk becomes evidence of fidelity to comfort rather than ambition. Abandonment often reframes itself as practicality. Narratives evolve to justify retreat, while nerves quietly congratulate survival. Microstory. A creator posts less. Drafts multiply privately. The public persona becomes curated, vulnerability archived and rarely shared. Creative work decays into private ritual instead of public reckoning. Latency protects identity from possible verdicts. Recognition also intensifies curiosity about provenance. The self asks where this aversion began, yet answers remain stubbornly somatic. Revisiting memory does not cleanse the pattern. It merely illuminates the scaffold upon which protective choices rest. There is an elegance to avoidance. It preserves continuity of self when outcomes threaten dramatic identity shifts. Microstory. A manager avoids making a firing decision. Emails multiply. The team stagnates. Efficiency survives while accountability withers. Organizational inertia often benefits from personal preservation. Structures adapt to protect members from exposure rather than to maximize growth. The cost is quieter, distributed across relationships, projects, and deferred possibilities that accumulate like dust in an attic. Awareness without resolution doubles the discomfort. Seeing the mechanism removes excuses but offers no comfort in action. A paradox emerges. Clarity increases the sense of constraint. Knowledge sharpens the edges of what cannot be easily changed. Microstory. An athlete trains secretly. Records improve. Public competition triggers a sudden illness narrative. Home victories remain private and untested. Conditioning pairs relief with privacy. Public arenas feel riskier than controlled practice zones where identity remains protected. Sometimes awareness provokes grief rather than guilt. The self recognizes loss of potential time and moments now gone. Grief does not propose solutions. It stains decisions with a recognition that safety extracted more than it returned. Microstory. Siblings reminisce about plans once shared. One sibling smiles apologetically. The unspoken list of unfinished commitments rests between them. Social mirrors offer ambiguous comfort. Others sympathize without understanding the nervous algebra that dictated retreat. The script recognizes technical language of science without converting it into prescriptions. It uses observation as a mirror, not a map. There is dignity in noticing, yet dignity does not equal escape from the pattern's logic or its gravitational pull. The nervous system continues to prefer predictable equilibrium. Even when equilibrium limits flourishing and multiplies regret slowly. Microstory. A volunteer stops leading initiatives. Attendance declines. The role shrinks gently until absence is misread as apathy. Absence can be misread. Observers often label inertia as character, missing the survival calculus beneath each withdrawal. Awareness without a plan produces a different suffering. It supplies context, but also intensifies the sense of being trapped by knowledge. The final scene of recognition is not resolution. It is a sustained clarity that collapses comfortable narratives into thin, exposed daylight. The self holds this clarity like a raw instrument. It hums with potential, yet offers no roadmap to alter ancient circuitry. In the quiet left behind, the unresolved insight remains. Survival-shaped behavior resists neat endings and lingers as uneasy truth. Recognition alters dialogue with others. Explanations become thinner. Conversations skirt deep stakes, leaving polite distance in their wake. Sometimes solace is found in compartmentalization. Responsibilities continue. Surface competence remains intact. Undercurrents silently reroute ambition elsewhere. Microstory. A friend excels publicly yet avoids promotions. Praise comforts while leadership's exposure feels like dangerous architecture to walk across. The camera lingers on that unresolved face. Clarity without direction. The last image refuses closure, and the silence insists.